What happens when one of Britain's most beloved actresses walks onto a talk show stage expecting warmth and celebration, only to be met with condescension, humiliation, and a public ambush? In just 34 seconds, one remark from Graham Norton would ignite one of the most uncomfortable confrontations in talk show history. A moment so charged that it ended with Dame Judi Dench being escorted off set, leaving the audience stunned into silence. The lights in the studio were dazzling that evening. The audience buzzed with anticipation. They'd come to see a legend, Dame Judi Dench, the face of British cinema, a woman who had redefined elegance, wit, and power for decades. She walked onto the stage in a sleek dark suit, her short silver hair perfectly styled, waving to the roaring crowd. This was supposed to be a celebration, a night of laughter, memories and stories from one of the greatest actresses alive. Just another evening on the Graham Norton Show. But from the moment she sat down, something felt off. Graham rose from his signature red chair to greet her. Cameras caught every moment. The handshake, the polite smiles, the applause. All routine. Judi crossed her legs gracefully, folded her hands in her lap, and smiled. She had no idea the evening was about to turn sour. "Dame Judi," Graham began cheerfully. "Wonderful to have you here. You look radiant as always." "Thank you, Graham," Judi replied, her voice warm. "It's lovely to be here." Graham leaned in. "Now, you've been in this business for what? 100 years now?" Laughter rippled through the crowd, but uneasily. The tone was teasing, yet cutting. Judi's smile wavered, just slightly. "Well," she said lightly, "not quite 100, though it certainly feels like it at times." Graham smirked. "You must have worked with everyone by now. Every actor, every director. Do you ever get tired of it? The same questions, the same press tours." Judi's expression sharpened. "I don't think of it as routine, Graham. Every role is different. Every story matters. That's why I still love what I do." Right. Graham waved dismissively. "But come on. At your age, don't you ever think about slowing down? Maybe letting some of the younger actresses have a turn?" The laughter stopped. A heavy silence filled the room. Judi's posture straightened. The warmth in her eyes was gone. "I beg your pardon?" she said softly. Too softly. Graham hesitated, realizing he'd touched a nerve. But instead of retreating, he pressed forward. "I'm just saying there's so much new talent coming up. Maybe it's time for the older generation to step aside gracefully." Judi's eyes flashed. "Step aside?" she repeated. "Graham, I've spent my entire life perfecting my craft. I've earned every role I've played. My age has nothing to do with my passion or my ability." Of course," Graham said with forced laughter. "But you have to admit, the film industry is a young person's game now. People want fresh faces, new energy, not the same old." He stopped himself, but it was too late. Judi leaned forward, her voice trembling with controlled fury. "The same old what, Graham? Go on. Finish your thought." Graham swallowed hard. "I didn't mean anything by it. I was just what?" she snapped. "Just trying to insult me on national television? Just trying to diminish everything I've accomplished? I came here to talk about art, about storytelling. Not to be talked down to by someone who thinks age determines worth." A murmur rippled through the audience. A few people began to clap. Graham's face reddened. He forced a laugh. "Dame Judi, you're overreacting. It's just a bit of fun. You know how this show works. A little banter." "Banter?" Judi repeated, incredulous. "You just implied that I should retire because I'm old." "That isn't banter, Graham. That's disrespect." Graham tried to grin, glancing at the crowd for support. But the laughter was gone. The room had turned. "Well, I mean," he stammered, "you are getting on a bit, aren't you? It's just facts. That was it." Judi rose from her chair, every inch the commanding performer she'd always been. "How dare you?" she said, her voice shaking with fury. "How absolutely dare you? I have forgotten more about acting than you will ever know about hosting a talk show. I have moved audiences. I have given my life to this craft. And you sit in that chair, asking shallow questions, mistaking cruelty for charm. The studio was dead silent. For the first time in his career, Graham Norton had nothing to say. And you think you have the right to tell me when my time is up? The audience erupted. Gasps, cheers, disbelief. A live crowd turning into a chorus of shock. Graham looked like he'd been struck. His mouth opened, then closed again, searching for words that wouldn't come. I didn't mean... You meant exactly what you said. Judi cut him off, her voice slicing through the air. And I will not sit here and be insulted. Not by you. Not by anyone. The charm drained from Graham's face. The performer's grin was gone, replaced by something small and mean. Oh, come off it, Judi. You're being dramatic. This is exactly why no one wants to work with divas anymore. You can't take a joke. You can't handle a little criticism. Criticism? Her voice turned to ice. You call that criticism? That wasn't a professional critique, Graham. That was a personal attack dressed up as humor. And you know it. Graham stood too now, his face red. Anger, embarrassment, panic all twisting together. You know what? Maybe I was right. Maybe you are past your prime. Because the Judi Dench I used to admire wouldn't throw a tantrum over a few harmless comments. The audience gasped. The control room must have been chaos. But the cameras kept rolling. Judi's voice dropped to a deadly whisper. Past my prime? I was nominated for an Oscar last year. What have you done lately, besides insult your guests? I've done plenty, Graham shot back. I've built a career. I've made people laugh. I've created something special here. And I won't have some washed-up actress tell me how to do my job. He said it. Washed up. The words hung in the air like smoke from an explosion. Judi went pale. Then the color rushed back to her cheeks in a wave of fury. Get me off this stage. Now, a producer hurried on, desperate to calm her. But it was too late. Judi turned to the audience, her composure returning like armor. I apologize, she said evenly. To all of you who came here expecting something joyful. Instead, you've witnessed something ugly. But I will not stand here and be disrespected. I have given too much, worked too hard, and earned too much respect to let anyone treat me this way. She turned back to Graham, her eyes ablaze. You should be ashamed of yourself. You had the privilege of interviewing one of the greatest actresses of her generation, and you used it to be cruel, petty, and small. I hope it was worth it. Graham's face flushed purple. Oh, come off it, Judi. You're blowing this completely out of proportion. You're making yourself look ridiculous. The only person who looks ridiculous here is you. Judi shot back. A man so insecure in his own relevance that he tears others down just to feel important. Another producer appeared, murmuring urgently in her ear. Judi nodded once. Yes, she said, her voice calm again. I'm leaving. I won't spend another second in this toxic environment. Graham threw up his hands. Fine, leave, walk out. Show everyone what a professional you really are. Judi turned back one last time. I've been a professional for over 50 years, she said, every word deliberate. I've worked through illness, loss, and heartbreak. And I've done it with dignity and grace. Two things you clearly know nothing about. She began to walk off stage. The audience rose to their feet, applause swelling as she went. But Graham couldn't help himself. You know what, Judi? He called after her. Maybe if you weren't so sensitive, you'd still be getting good roles. Maybe the problem isn't your age. Maybe it's your attitude. Judi froze mid-step. Slowly she turned. The look in her eyes could have frozen fire. She walked back toward him, stopping just a few feet away. The entire room was holding its breath. My attitude, she said quietly. You want to talk about attitude? You invited me here under false pretenses. Smiled, shook my hand, and then tried to humiliate me. You questioned my relevance, my talent, my right to keep working. You called me old, washed up, and sensitive. And now you want to call that my attitude? Graham crossed his arms. I'm just saying, If you can't handle a bit of ribbing, maybe television isn't for you anymore." Judy's lip curled. "A bit of ribbing? Is that what you call it? Let me tell you something, Graham. I've been interviewed by the best in the business. Journalists who ask real questions, who challenge me, who push me to think deeper about my work. That's good television. That's respect. What you did tonight wasn't journalism. It wasn't entertainment. It was mean-spirited nonsense from a man who mistakes rudeness for wit." The room was silent now, so still that you could hear the cameras hum. This wasn't a talk show anymore. It was a reckoning. Graham forced a smirk, trying to recover what little dignity he had left. "Well," he said, his tone dripping with mockery. "Thank you for the critique, Dame Judi." But the audience didn't laugh. No one did. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating, the kind that made every second stretch into eternity. Graham's smirk faltered as he looked around, expecting the usual chuckles, the supportive applause that had always been his safety net. Instead, he was met with hundreds of cold, disapproving stares. Someone in the back shouted, "She handled that better than you ever could." Another voice followed, "You were out of line, Graham." The energy in the room had shifted completely. What had once been his domain, his stage, his audience, his laughter, now felt like a tribunal, and he was the one on trial. Graham cleared his throat, trying to keep his composure. "All right, folks, let's move on, shall we?" His attempt at levity only deepened the discomfort. Cameras were still rolling, and every strained smile, every nervous glance would soon be dissected online. In the control room, a producer muttered under their breath, "Cut to commercial. Now. But the delay was fatal. In those few lingering seconds before the fade-out, the broadcast caught everything. Graham's flicker of panic, the audience's visible disapproval, the empty chair where Dame Judi Dench had been sitting moments before. By morning, that image, the empty chair, would be everywhere. Clips of the confrontation spread like wildfire. Headlines screamed across social media. Dame Judi Dench walks out on Graham Norton after disrespectful interview. The night the audience turned on the host, even fellow actors weighed in. Ian McKellen tweeted, "There's a difference between humor and humiliation." Judi reminded us of that tonight. Within hours, the network released a statement claiming creative differences and miscommunication. But no amount of PR spin could hide what millions had seen. A veteran host undone by his own arrogance, and a living legend walking away with her dignity untouched. Meanwhile, Judi stayed silent. No interviews, no statements, just a single line released through her publicist. Respect is not optional. And that, more than any monologue or tweet, became the defining quote of the incident. Graham's next show aired to half its usual audience. The laughter sounded forced, the energy hollow. The once beloved host now looked like a man haunted by the echo of his own words. Because deep down, he knew what everyone else did. That night, he hadn't just lost an interview. He'd lost his credibility. But the audience wasn't having it. Someone in the back shouted, "You were out of line." Others nodded, murmuring in agreement. The laughter that had once filled the studio had curdled into something colder. Judgment, discomfort, even anger. The energy in the room had completely shifted. Graham was no longer the charming, quick-witted host the audience adored. He was the villain of the moment. He tried to smooth it over, forcing a grin. "Come on, everyone. It was just a bit of fun that got out of hand. You know how these things go." But nobody laughed. The silence that followed was louder than any applause. In the corridor outside, Dame Judi was quietly collecting her things. Her hands, steady now, betrayed none of the adrenaline that had carried her through those final tense moments on stage. What remained was calm, resolute, unshakable calm. She had stood her ground. She had refused to be belittled, and it felt right. A knock on the dressing room door. "Dame Judi, Graham's producers want to know if there's anything they can do to make this right." Judi looked up from her handbag, her gaze clear and composed. "They can make sure it never happens to another guest. They can have a real conversation with him about respect and professionalism. And if they truly wish to make amends, they can issue a public apology." She paused, her tone soft but firm. "Though I won't be holding my breath for that last one." The assistant nodded and quickly disappeared. Judi glanced at herself in the mirror one last time, smoothing her jacket, adjusting the brooch at her collar. She looked exactly as she intended to feel. Unbroken. As she walked down the corridor, the muted glow of studio lights flickered across her face. Through a nearby monitor, she caught a glimpse of Graham trying to continue the show. His next guest sat awkwardly, the tension still heavy in the air. The magic was gone. Outside, the night was cool and still. Her driver stood waiting beside the car, having been informed of her early departure. As she slid into the back seat, the exhaustion hit her. But so did a strange piece. "Rough night, ma'am?" the driver asked gently. "You could say that." Judi replied with a faint smile. "But necessary." The car eased away from the curb, leaving behind the noise, the lights, and the man who had underestimated her. Inside the studio, the laughter had not returned. The audience's applause was polite but brittle. When the final segment ended and the cameras cut, the crew moved in silence. Graham sat alone in his signature red chair, the weight of the night pressing down on him. His producers hovered nearby, uncertain. "We need to talk about what happened tonight," one of them ventured. Graham waved a dismissive hand. "It was just a misunderstanding. These things blow over." But even as he said it, he could feel the lie tightening in his chest. This wouldn't blow over. It would follow him, define him. In the control room, the phones were already ringing off the hook. Online, clips of the exchange were spreading at light speed. Headlines forming, hashtags trending. The narrative was already being written, and Graham Norton was no longer the witty charmer of BBC primetime. He was the man who had disrespected Dame Judi Dench. In her car, Judi's phone buzzed continuously. Messages poured in from colleagues, directors, and friends. "Proud of you. He had it coming. You handled that perfectly." She read a few, smiling faintly but didn't reply. "Not yet." The driver caught her reflection in the mirror. "If you don't mind me saying, ma'am, you handled that beautifully. Stood your ground without losing your grace." Judi met his eyes, her expression warm but resolute. "Thank you. I've been in this business long enough to know my worth. No one gets to take that away from me. Not at this stage of my life. Not ever." And that was the truth of it. She had spent decades building a legacy of strength, artistry, and integrity. One insecure man with a microphone couldn't undo that. Back at the studio, the cleanup crew worked in silence. Graham sat in his dressing room, staring at his reflection in the mirror. For once, he didn't see the cheeky grin that had charmed millions. Only the exhaustion and regret of someone who had gone too far. His phone buzzed. The network. He didn't need to answer to know what awaited him. Judi's car wound through the quiet London streets, past theaters and landmarks that had witnessed her life's work. She felt the ache of the night fade into something lighter, something like pride. When the car stopped at her home, she gathered her things and stepped out into the calm night. Tomorrow would bring headlines, debates, apologies, and statements. But tonight, she had said what needed to be said. She had reminded everyone watching that dignity does not mean silence, and that respect, once lost, cannot be laughed off. As her front door closed softly behind her, the city carried on. But something had changed. A line had been drawn. A message had been delivered. And Dame Judi Dench had once again proven why she would always be a force to be reckoned with.